Beyond the Pillion is recorded on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we would like to pay our respects to elders, past and present.
Welcome to Beyond the Pillion. This is episode 17. We are talking about that point after a ride, finding a good place to park. My name is Kahiwa Sebire. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the chaotic one.
And my name is Mark Drechsler, he, him pronouns, and I have nothing further to add to the conversation at this point.
Well, good thing we haven't got a good, 30, 40 minutes of, time to actually just talk to each other. So this is going to go great.
I'll think of something along the way, don't worry.
I'm sure that you will. So today we are talking about parking your motorbike. This was a special request. Shout out to Mel. Who wanted a little bit of some information about how to pick a park and how to park your bike. So this is for you and hopefully some other people too.
So we have broken up a few different, components when you're thinking about parking a motorbike. And parking a motorbike compared to parking a car, I actually think it's a bit more of a problem-solving activity. You have more flexibility because you're smaller, you're more manoeuvrable. You can put your vehicle in a whole bunch of places that cars can't, and you also have a lot more a lot less defined ways of parking. Given that most parks out there are going to be designed for a car. So you've got a lot more flexibility, but you're also faced with other challenges. That means sometimes you've got to think a little bit more, and that, particularly for a new rider, can be something that can be quite challenging to work out. Well, what am I meant to be doing? Where am I meant to be parking? And what are the things that I need to consider? So that's what we've tried to structure out today's podcast about, and I think we'll start off talking a little bit about where you can park. Kahiwa.
Yeah, so as we go through some of the different tips around how to actually park and the things to consider, as Mark just mentioned, we thought it might be useful to start off thinking about some of the different places that you can park, because they can be kind of different from when you might be driving a car or another four-wheeled vehicle. So I suppose the first most obvious one is thinking about the same car parks where you might park a car. So we'll be referring to that as, I think, a car marked park. This is going to be a terrible episode.
Yeah, let's roll with that.
Tongue twisters, car marked park. And so thinking about if you're, the parallel parks along the side, the footpath, the kind of 90-degree type parks at like a shopping centre or something like that. And then in some places where you also have an angled park, I think these are usually, they mark them as like 30 degrees or something. Which if you're in Adelaide, think about Hutt Street, those angled parks along the side of the street there. So that's one place. The second place, particularly in the CBD, which is a real advantage to riding a motorbike in town, are the dedicated motorbike parks. So these are specifically marked on the road, usually between car marked parks, and signed as being specifically for motorbikes. And so those can also be either 90 degrees to the footpath, or they can be on an angle depending on the way the rest of the parks are structured in the city.
And could I jump in there and just say that for Adelaide, and I'm guessing that most capital cities would have something similar these days. If you do a Google search for Adelaide motorcycle parking, there is actually a map done by, I'm guessing, the Adelaide City Council or similar, that shows all of the places around the city where there are dedicated motorcycle parks for you to use. So sometimes they can be a bit tricky to find if you don't know where to look. So do your research beforehand and have a look and see if there are some in there.
Yeah, and within Adelaide City itself, they're usually in kind of clumps of about 3 to 5 in spots all around the city. Also on that map, and it might be similar in other cities where you might be, dear listener, there are also kind of motorbike specific parks on the footpath. So in a couple of spots within Adelaide CBD especially, there are places specifically signed where you can park your motorbike on the footpath rather than on the road. And I know that in places like Melbourne, that is pretty much anywhere across the CBD, you can park your motorbike on the footpath. In Adelaide, there are specific places where that is permitted.
Yes, more progressive cities have been doing this for a long, long time, whereas here in Adelaide, where you cross the border and turn your clock back 20 years, we're only really cottoned on in the last couple of years that, footpaths are actually a really sensible place for motorbikes to park. So rant over. Thank you. Sorry, Kahiwa.
That's fine. And I think one of the other places, again, specifically in the city, but there might be in other places as well, where there might be paid parking buildings. Often they will have motorbike specific parks. And at least here in Adelaide, a number of the ones that I've been in, it's a lot cheaper to park your motorbike in that parking building, special price. Usually I think some places like $7-8 a day compared to 16, 18, 20 or more. And they're usually a lot closer to the entrance, which is also fun. And so that can be a really great idea if you need to leave your bike somewhere for a longer period of time, or particularly concerned about security and safety of your bike as well. That can be a good option to have a look at.
Yep.
So those are some of the different places that you can park. I think for most people, the vast majority of time, you're probably going to be parking in what we've referred to as a car marked park. Or if you're lucky enough to find a spot where there are motorbike specific parks, you might be doing that as well. So the next kind of thought is really thinking about how do you choose and how do you then actually get your bike into that specific spot? So, Mark, I know that you had some thoughts about some kind of guiding principles about how to pick a park.
Yeah, I was trying to think with that extra flexibility, and sorry, I'll add one more in there, Kahiwa, and that's when you get away from city parking locations and you're parking on a suburban side street where nothing's marked anywhere.
Oh,
where you've
yes,
just got
good
complete free reign to park wherever you want, which is another, all of the constraints are gone and your mind's getting blown because how do you know where to park when you're in that kind of situation? So I came up with 3 guiding principles, not exhaustive as usual. If you think I've missed something major, then let us know, post some comments, share your views. So first and foremost for me is parking somewhere that you can easily get out. Now that sounds really obvious, but parking yourself somewhere, particularly, best case scenario where you can just jump on your bike and ride straight out forwards. And we'll talk a little bit more about why this is important on sloping surfaces in a little bit. But parking somewhere that you can sort of see that you're not going to get boxed in, you're not going to come back to your bike and find a situation where you're going to really struggle to get the thing back out on the road. So sometimes when you're parking, it can be worth spending a little bit more time before, getting the right park and getting set up properly, because it will make it a lot easier rather than struggling and fighting to get the thing out. So that's guiding principle number 1. Guiding principle number 2 is making the best use that you can of the fact that you are really small. And very maneuverable compared to a 4-wheeled vehicle of just about any kind. So that is one of the big attractions once you start feeling more comfortable about having a motorbike, being able to head into areas where there are not a lot of parks and knowing that you have a very small vehicle that you can tuck into all kinds of little nooks and crannies that bigger vehicles can't. So try to make best use of your size in terms of, firstly, making it as good as you possibly can for yourself, but also trying to minimise your impact on, wherever possible, on other road users. So And we might talk a little bit more about that as well later when we talk about possibly parking as a group. And the third guiding principle is really around parking to make sure that both you and your bike are as safe as you can possibly make them at all times. So we mentioned, I can't remember which episode, but one of our earlier episodes, we spent quite a bit of time talking about keeping your bike yours. Bike theft from the CBD, I think statistically from any city area is statistically one of the highest risk places that your motorbike can get stolen. And I've now watched, had a customer bring in a video the other day of his bike being stolen from just near a security camera. And with no disc lock and no chain and no other security, just the steering lock on, it took two people about 5 seconds to smash the steering lock and to walk away with the bike.
Wow.
So it was really impressive and scary, and it wasn't an old bike. It was a new bike. They couldn't do anything with it when they stole it, and it was recovered very shortly afterwards. But yeah, so safety of your bike, that's not just theft, but also making sure that you don't come back and find your bike on its side. Kahiwa, you might want to talk about that one. In fact, has that ever happened to you, coming back and finding your bike lying on a side? And how were you parking when it happened?
Yes. So to your example earlier, that additional kind of place. So parking in an area where there are no marked parks for cars or any other vehicles. And so I had parked so that my bike was, probably about 45, 50 degrees to the footpath, with the rear wheel in towards the gutter or the edge of the footpath where the footpath meets the road, and the front wheel is a little bit further heading in the direction of traffic. So leaned over and kind of facing in towards, and about a metre to the left or in the direction of traffic was a vehicle that had already also parked. So I thought I'll give myself a bit of space between me and them, but not so much that I'm taking up a whole another car length of a park, because that's also annoying for other people. And then came back out to hear that my bike essentially had been reversed into, ostensibly by the car that had been parked to the left, and it was on its side, and had a very helpful bystander help me get that back up, which was great. Thankfully, not too much damage, but a bit frustrating more than anything else.
Yeah, and if I come back to the guiding principles, so you certainly parked so you could easily get out. As a rule of thumb, and we'll talk more about this later, but parking rear wheel to the curb wherever you are tends to be, as a rule of thumb, the best way to do it, because then you can ride straight away from the curb straight out into traffic rather than having to reverse out. So tick, you parked so you could easily get out. Tick, you made good use of your size because you gave the car that was in front, to your left as you were looking out onto the road, you gave them what you thought was enough room, and rather than parking parallel to the curb and taking up a whole new car park. And, it was a reasonable thought that you were parking with enough space and in the middle of a busy suburban road. So you kind of did everything right. You just didn't take into account the fact that some people, A, can't drive particularly well, and B, have no moral fibre when it comes to damaging somebody else's property and owning up to it. But
I think on reflection, if I think about that third principle of parking so that the bike is as safe as possible, on reflection, this was a larger vehicle. I think it was like a 4x4 something.
Yep.
I'm not going to name a brand, but large and high. And on reflection, it's possible that even though I'd given enough space, I thought that I hadn't given enough space for the person driving to be able to see my bike out of their rearview mirror, to then notice that it was there possibly, before they reverse to then go and join traffic. Now, I would have thought while you're walking up to your car, you might have noticed a bike in behind. It's bright yellow, but not everyone notices everything all the time. So for me, I think the lesson learned there is for those vehicles that are where the driver might be seeing a little bit higher or slightly longer wheelbase, I think the best option is probably to give a little bit more space between the end of that car and where I park my bike. But as you say, there's nothing to be said for people who choose not to take accountability for hearing something, 180 kilos of motorbike crunch hit the ground. I would have thought you might have heard something and gone,
I would have thought you might
what
have
did
as
I
well,
do?
but yeah.
Hey.
But, you did just about everything right there and it still didn't work out. And that's probably one of the things with motorcycling that we've talked about plenty of times around risk management.
Yep.
You can never completely count out what other people will do or just other other shit happens moments, I suppose, if you'll excuse the profanity.
And I think it's another lesson, as you say, you can't account for every risk. You're not going to mitigate them all. Thankfully, in this instance, there was very little damage. I think I just got some scratches on my top box more than anything else. And the bike is fully insured. So it is what it is. But I do think
it is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of an example there around that technique around how to park, particularly in those places where there are no marked parks on the road. What I heard kind of you talking through there was, some of those guiding principles at how to actually park. So where possible, we have the rear wheel to the curb. So sometimes, as you said before, that means you might kind of ride in, kind of go out and then reverse back. So it takes a little bit longer, a few more seconds just to kind of get yourself prepared and settled. But that does mean, assuming no one has hit you, you can just, ride in, you can see oncoming traffic and the traffic that you hopefully are going to be able to join. You can see that all, you're not having to reverse into it. And I think that's actually a really important point, taking that time to set yourself up to reverse in so that when you get on and you're ready to actually ride out, you can see as much as possible what's happening on the road around you so that you can rejoin the traffic safely.
Yeah, that is the general way that I try and do it for all of the reasons that you've just said. It takes a little bit longer sometimes, but it's worth it.
And so that probably applies also to parking in like dedicated motorbike parks, would you say?
Yeah. Again, that kind of depends on how they've been set up on the road. So I have seen some that are at that 30 degree to 45 degree maybe angle to the curb and done in a way that it really only makes sense to go front end in. Which is kind of not the best. But then if you are trying to reverse into those, then you're actually going to be, when you're coming out, you're going to be riding directly into oncoming traffic, which is not great either. So, yeah, I can only guess that some of those specific motorbike parks in the city marked out on the ground have been done by people who drive cars.
Yeah, trying to keep with the flow of, if all of the car marked parks are that 30 degree angle, it's like, let's just keep that.
Well,
just
let's
make them smaller.
That. Yeah, exactly. And that's, so people who don't understand motorbikes shouldn't be allowed to design motorbike parks. But anyway, that's okay. That's okay.
I know recently parked in some of those angled motorbike parks in one of the spots in Adelaide CBD. And in this instance, there were only like 2 or 3 parks in a group. Like in one little space. So that actually worked out okay to, in this instance, same as I would do if the motorbike park was on a 90 degree angle to the footpath, kind of come in slow, doing a little bit of a kind of a curve around and then quite a tight reverse to get the rear wheel towards the curb. And because there were only 3 parks and I was able to get one, I think, on the edge, so didn't have to worry too much about potentially hitting another bike as you're kind of bringing the bike in. That seemed to work really well. And actually what was interesting then, so you got the rear wheel to the curb, you're on an angle. Technically, you are not in line with the direction of traffic that you would be joining, but it did give really good visibility for the direction on that side of the road, as well as the other side of the road. And then it was just a bit more of a turn to kind of join in the traffic, and that actually worked pretty well. So it just took, a little bit more finessing to get the bike into that spot.
And I think that kind of comes back to this whole concept that parking a motorbike is a lot about problem solving. The guidelines we're giving you don't work in all cases. So there are some times where you'll look at a situation and say, oh, hang on, no, that doesn't make sense there. I'm going to try doing it this way. And it will be a learning process. So for anybody that is feeling a bit overwhelmed about your riding anywhere and trying to work out where to park, don't worry. That's pretty normal. The same as a lot of things with motorcycling. There are new skills to learn. There are new problems to work through, and parking is one of those that you will get your head around over time.
Yep. I think one of the things that I still struggle with parking, particularly in the dedicated motorbike parks, is getting the angles right to, when I'm pulling out to then kind of reverse back in. I pride myself on being able to, reverse parallel park a car pretty well. Have not got that right for a motorbike yet consistently.
Yep. Which is practice, the same as anything else.
Yeah.
Now, I did want to throw in a word on legality, and then I want to throw a question over to you, Kahiwa. So we're not lawyers. We're not offering legal advice. If you know somebody who's particularly into the laws of parking and vehicular use on roads, then in your local area, then by all means go and check with them. But my experiences so far in riding here in South Australia is that if you are on a motorbike, pardon me, then you are entitled to the same thing as if you were driving a car. So in that sense, if you come up to a place which is designed for one single car park or car to park in, then you can take up that entire park with your motorcycle, and that is absolutely within the law. And similarly, if there is something that you can't do in your car, then odds are it's going to be frowned upon if you do it on a motorbike. So I can think of two examples there for me where I have received parking infringement notices, fines. One was parking on a footpath on a busy summer's day down near the beach where there were no car parks. It was chockers. A couple of other motorbikes had parked up on the footpath, big footpath, not impeding anyone, seemed to make a whole lot of sense. Parked on the footpath, came back to a ticket saying, down here you can't park on a footpath, which, I wouldn't park a car on a footpath either. And the second one was parking with the front of the motorbike pointing directly away from the flow of traffic. So parking, if I was in a car, the equivalent would be I'd park the car backwards, which is, at least here and probably in many, many areas, that is something that you are not allowed to do. You need to be parking your car in the direction of travel. Otherwise, you could be fined. Now, my reasons for doing that I tried to fight the council on was because of the slope of the surface, that it actually made a lot more sense to have the bike parked in the way that I did. Otherwise, the bike was going to fall over. We'll talk a bit more about ground surfaces. Once again, the local authorities did not seem to care about that. It's like, no, you've broken the law, you've parked arse about face, and please pay your $40-odd fine or something. So again, when policymakers and administrators and everyone else don't understand how motorbikes work, then sometimes you can get in a bit of strife. So it's just a little bit about the legality of parks. That just be aware that typically you will have the right to use up one full car parking space for your motorbike if you have to, but noting that you also don't don't need to. Just because it's legal doesn't mean there aren't other ways that you can creatively think to look at smaller places to park that aren't going to take up a full car park. But Kahiwa, I want to pose a question to you.
Mm-hmm.
You are in a shopping centre car park.
Yes.
It is dead flat.
Yes.
It is very busy. All of the car parks are marked out at 90 degrees to the direction of travel.
Mm-hmm.
You see a car park amongst the sea of other parked cars that is empty, and you are on your motorbike.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, it's dead flat. I'm guessing you would reverse into that park, because that's what we
Yes.
talked about before. You'd sort of go up and back into park in there. Whereabouts in that? So noting you could fit about probably 4 at least motorbikes in that one car parking spot. Where would you position your motorcycle, and why?
Oh. So if it's busy, generally speaking, if I'm traveling by myself, I would probably park up the back of the car park. So as far in as possible. And I would probably still try to be over to one side. So the idea that if necessary, if there was another motorcyclist, they could probably fit in alongside me up at the back of that car park. I have seen video footage of motorcycles parked like at the back of, all the way to the end of a car park, marked for cars, and seen a car driver reverse their car into that park and knock the bike over. In my mind, that's kind of similar to the car driver who decided not to notice or care about my bike when they reversed over it in that park alongside of the road. And I can't account for people making poor decisions, but I can, generally speaking, try to make space for particularly other motorcyclists in that kind of area. If there are no dedicated motorbike parks, then I would probably go, if I imagine the wheel tracks of a car alongside that car park, starting towards where the rear wheel, one of the rear wheels might be, and kind of be in that spot at the back of a car park. Comments, thoughts?
Well,
Did I pass?
I don't think that this is one of these problem-solving things where I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I mean, everything you've said there is totally valid. You are trying to be considerate
but I need a
of
gold star.
Okay, here's your validation, gold star.
Thank you.
You are trying to be considerate of other road users. You're trying to allow multiple bikes to use the same car parking space. All that is, there is nothing wrong with it. It's very admirable. You've also mentioned the risk there of having the bike knocked over by a car that either doesn't see or chooses to not see, or, and I'll tell you why I like a different method, a car that comes stonking into the park, front end in at high speed because they're in a rush or whatever, and they're halfway in, fully committed to going in, and before they can do anything about it, they realise, oh goodness, there's a motorbike park there, and I've just bumped it. I had that happen once, like 25 years ago, I think, which at least the car driver did leave their details and apologised, and we sorted out through them paying for the repairs. But since then, I have been more of an advocate to, yes, reversing in, so doing the same, but parking with my front wheel almost level with the front of the cars that are parked on either side. If I'm on a larger bike, so given I've got a few bikes, if I'm parked on my FJR 1300, which is almost the size of a small car, then I will park with my front wheel lined up with the noses of the cars and with the bike dead center of that car parking spot. Now, two different things there. I like parking at the front because it means people who are driving up can see really clearly, oh yeah, there's something in there, rather than parking at the back and then getting halfway in and realize, oh damn, bloody motorcyclists, why can't they find their own bloody parks? And it's like, well, talk to whoever's doing the parking to actually give us some motorbike parks.
Yeah.
So making it more visible to those who are driving into the park or coming close to the park. And yeah, parking again. If I'm on a big bike, then I'll just tend to park in the centre because it's going to be tough for other bikes to get around me anyway.
Yeah.
If I'm on something smaller like the MT-09 or one of my other smaller bikes, then probably right hand wheel mark, because then I'm parked up the front. But then if somebody else does come in on a motorbike and is looking for a park, great, tuck it up behind it on an angle. And you'll at least still be able to get into the park. You're going to be able to use the 3/4 of the parking space that I've left. But at least mine is still at the front of the queue, which is more visible. And also, just in case, if you're parking at the back and all of a sudden 2 or 3 other bikes come in and park in front of you without really thinking about it, then, you run the risk of being locked in at the back.
Yeah, that's fair. I know at one of the local shopping centres here, the motorbike parking, which, shout out to them to having actual dedicated motorbike parks, unlike a bunch of other shopping centres around outer Greater Adelaide. Rather than being that 90-degree, sliced up dedicated motorbike parks, they've got like a bigger space, and the idea is you just kind of fit as many as you can in this space that's on an angle, which is quite interesting. But I do like that point about being placing the bike at the edge, or not the edge, the entry part of the park, which I think goes with your guiding principle, just generally about being seen as much as possible. I think one of the things that I personally worry about in terms of parking at the entry part of that park, if I am essentially in that kind of 90-degree-ish angle within there, I worry about cars knocking the bike on the edge, or like the motorbikes as they're going into their parks. I've seen plenty of people make touch and go decisions when they're parking their car in terms of other vehicles on either side of them. So that's one of the things that I personally worry about. But no, I think that's a very good point about making sure that it can be seen that there is a vehicle in that park, so that people aren't accelerating into it in a hurry, which, as we come into the holiday season and shopping mania at this time of year, people are driving angrily at the moment, or more people are driving angrier than usual. And
yay, Christmas.
Looking to just fight for any particular kind of parking spot. So I think that's actually a really good point around making it clear that that spot is taken.
But your point as well about being sort of nicked by cars as they are turning in if you are parked front, that's valid too. So keep on coming back. Problem solving, there's no one perfect answer to parking. There's just all different things that you should consider. And one of those that I would like to hear a little bit more from Kahiwa as well is talk to me about ground surfaces and why they matter more than when you're in a car, and you don't really have to worry about what you're parking on to most extents, but what are the things that you need to consider on a motorbike?
Yes. So I think, as we've mentioned, just generally in terms of riding, when you're riding, you are likely to be more aware of, or need to be more aware of, the road surface or the ground that you are riding over compared to when you might be driving in a car. I think one of the things that I am very conscious about is certainly the slope of the surface. And particularly, as you were kind of talking to before, where I place the bike, and then once I'm off it and it's on the side stand, how much is it leaning, depending on where it is placed and the angle that it's placed on the ground. So I know one time I went to go and pick up a present for my sister, and it was out in the suburbs, and it's trying to park my bike, and the road itself is actually quite a steep slope. And trying to work out if, depending on which side of the road I'm on, which angle do I want the bike to be on, so that either you've got not only just the physical slope, that if the bike was to come off the brakes or something or other, is it going to roll into the footpath or out into the road, depending on which direction the bike is facing? But then also, depending on where I might place it, is it going to be leaning too much over, that it potentially places a lot of stress on the side stand to hold it up? Or is it potentially actually too close to vertical that it risks being easily tipped over onto the side that doesn't have the side stand? And so again, that's a little bit of problem solving. What are your thoughts around good ideas for dealing with the slope of the surface?
I would say that if you firstly, trying to park on slopes is evil. It is a very challenging thing to try and get that just right spot. That also lines up with some of those other guidelines about being able to get out, about parking legally. And sometimes it can be a real trial and error challenge to get your bike in a good spot. If you have to compensate because you are parking on a slope and you're not going to get a perfect flat spot, err on the side of having your bike leaning over a little more rather than a little less. And that is because your side stand can actually take a whole lot more weight than you would think. That doesn't mean go and sit on it and then have a pillion on the back while you both try and sort of bounce the thing until you snap the side stand part. Just about every bike out there can take a heck of a lot more weight than you would think, given they're often spindly little things. So, whereas if you are parking the bike and it's too close to vertical, they can tip over. I have seen wind knock a bike over, push a bike over when it was too close to vertical, big gust of wind, and over it went. So if you have to choose a lesser of the two evils, have your bike leaning a little more. Also have your bike, if your bike looks like it is potentially going to roll forward or backwards, always have it rolling backwards, so pointing the nose uphill. And that is because you think about how your side stand flicks back, and it is by you kicking it backwards up into where it sits next to the frame. Now, if the bike is rolling backwards, then it is going to keep locked in. So the side stand will stay down because rolling it backwards will keep it in like that. If it rolls forward, then it will actually roll forward to a point where the side stand will flick up, and then the bike will be on its side. So, definitely a bit more to the left and a bit more uphill if you have to sort of make a judgment call.
I hadn't thought about that in terms of the side stand like flicking back as the bike moves forward. Oh, that's good.
Yep, which is another general rule, given that most roads have a camber that makes the road a little bit higher in the centre of the road, and then it slopes down towards the gutters. That's also why generally putting your rear wheel to the gutter means if it's going to roll, it's going to roll with that slope, which is going to keep it on the side stand rather than falling off. So, definitely keep those in mind. And also thinking about not putting yourself in a park where the only way that you can get yourself out is to have to physically push the bike backwards up a slope, because you don't have a reverse gear.
Yeah.
Unless you're on a Honda Goldwing, I think might have them. But just about every other bike known to humanity does not have a reverse gear. So if you're on a slope and you can at least use the power of the bike to roll yourself forward when you get out, happy days. If you don't, then that is where you might find yourself in a situation where, depending on your physical strength and the size of the bike, you can be in real strife trying to get it to push up to get out. And we're actually going to teaser alert, spoiler alert, that's what we're going to talk about in our next episode about shifting bikes around, because that is another art form.
And I was just thinking about that. In that example, that story before, where I was talking about parking on a slope, and there were parks with facing down the hill in the shade, and it was quite a hot day, and there was space on the other side of the road facing up the hill. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, it'd be nice to be able to leave the bike in the shade and not come back to a super hot black seat. And going, yeah, no, actually, let's do a quick little U-turn. Let's park up the hill so that rear of the bike is then facing into the curb, and front of the bike is facing up the hill.
Yep.
And I also remember the difference when I had parked the bike, the difference that just a slight angle change of the bike in relation to the footpath made in terms of the lean of the bike. And I think that's a really big advantage being on a motorbike. You've actually got that full 90 degrees almost that you can choose to take, get the optimal kind of lean and angle so that you are as close as possible getting a really good amount of lean in, but not being too far over, and those types of things. You've got quite a big space to be able to take advantage of, even if you do end up going close to 90 degrees with the footpath and then you end up leaning a little bit. It was quite an interesting realization coming back to that problem solving idea.
Bingo. Yep.
Yeah, it was very, very cool.
Very, very good example there. And one final thing I want to throw in there as a consideration that you don't really have to worry about in a car is the softness of the ground that you are parking on. Now, whether that be mud or gravel can do this as well, particularly if it's quite deep gravel rather than hard packed stuff. Unlike a car tire where you've got quite four large contact areas that are holding the thing in place where your tires are on the ground. With a motorbike, you've got two small ones in your front and your rear tire, and then you've got one tiny one that might be the size on most bikes of maybe a 20-cent piece, an Australian 20-cent piece, maybe. And particularly if you're parking on grass or dirt or anything soft, earthy.
Or even gravel.
Yep, gravel will do it as well. Then be very careful. So firstly, just try gently putting your side stand down and leaning the bike over and having a look to see if it's just sinking straight down into whatever it is. If it is, stop and find somewhere else to park.
Yeah.
And even then if you think it looks okay, get off and just try sort of pulling the bike a little bit more over to see if it's going to gradually sink into whatever it's parked on, because that is something I have seen more than once. People who they've parked up, they think, oh yeah, that ground's hard enough, jump off. Yep, looked all right when I went away. It's been slowly leaning over, and then they come back and their bike's on its side because the side stand has just sunk completely into the soft earth. And unfortunately, your only options there with that are either don't park on it, or either carry something with you or find something that is wider and flatter. A soft drink can, flattened out. Can be a good one in an emergency. To flatten it out on its side or end to end. That will make a much bigger contact patch with the ground. I know some people carry around little sort of flat plastic plates that are maybe the size of the palm of your hand, and they just carry those around and maybe under the seat. And then if you need one, get it out. You've got a bigger spot that you can put the bike down. Really, those are your only options. You can try for those who have got bikes with center stands. Center stands often aren't any better because you're slightly spreading the load, but it's still going to run the risk of just sinking down into whatever it is you're parked on. So
it's really that surface area of the actual bottom of the stand and how that, the amount of that compared to the weight and the
Correct.
pressure.
Yep.
I do now. Oh, brainwave. We need a merch idea. We could make a key ring attachment that you could then put on your motorbike key ring and have it. Anyway, I'll refine that idea.
That's a big ass key ring. Yeah, well, let's put a pin in that for now. We'll get R&D working on that.
But I was thinking of an example, a story, a ride recently down to I think it was Silver Sands club down in Aldinga, and a patch of kind of area there where it was mostly kind of dirt. It'd been a little bit of rain recently, so a little bit of kind of soft mud, and I was trying to park the bike to get like a nice sexy picture for the gram. And again, I think what really struck me was that idea of it really is just about angles. Well, there's a lot of opportunity with a motorbike to slightly different angle, slightly different kind of spot where you might place the bike, and then all of a sudden the slope is less of an issue. The kind of ground surface, it's a little bit easier to find a smaller part there where it's robust enough to have the side stand and kind of lean over and take that pressure. And that wasn't too much of a challenge.
So moral to the story, try different positions, try different angles.
Yes.
You'll know when it's right.
Yes. I was also thinking about, in terms of the slope of the surface, the ride I just did this weekend for the Australasian Women's Motorcycle Ride Day. A bunch of us had parked under the shade of a tree. It was not gravel, not mud, but it was kind of dirt with maybe like tree seeds and roots and a little bit of gravelly things. So kind of mixed up on that. And the end of the park away from the road was up a little bit. And so again, I think that was another interesting problem-solving point there as I'm parking my bike towards the back of that park, just thinking, how do I balance the slope of that park where the back is actually higher? I've got, lots of loose things on the ground. I want to make sure that my side stand is not on top of something that could pop out. I'm trying to nestle it into somewhere that's a bit more stable. And on enough of an angle that it's got a good, decent lean over into that side stand, that it is stable, but then also making space for other people to park into that area as well. So I think that was another example of that problem solving. And all it took, pulled up, reversed in, and then I got those two different options. I think that I tend to use in terms of maneuvering the bike into the right kind of spot is either like paddle walking or like a little bit of clutch, letting the clutch out to very slowly move forward, and then paddle walking back. And you're on the bike and you can maneuver the handlebars to get the different kind of angle that you might be going backwards or forwards with. One of the things that I'm a big fan of now that I know how to do it, thank you, Mark, is being on the side of the bike, so body facing into the bike, one hand on the handlebar, one hand on the seat, and taking a little bit of that weight into you and just pushing in either direction. And then you've got a lot more scope there to change the angle as you're going. You can see which direction you're moving the bike in a lot easier. It's a bit more difficult when the bike is a bit heavier, but that was very, very useful, I think, for me to be able to see where I was going and maneuvering around another bike and a tree and a this thing and a that thing. And so we'll, in that next episode, be talking through and hopefully also have some videos to show the different ways to actually physically move and maneuver your bike in different ways.
Yeah.
But that was really helpful to get into a nice good spot in that space there.
Yep. Yeah, and that was a nice little teaser for the next episode, because there was a whole thing about moving bikes around. Having started working in a motorbike shop, heading on 2 years ago now. I have learned so much about how to move motorbikes around. That I've been riding for 20-something years already, and then going into that role, I now understand so much more about how to throw bikes around. And anyway, we'll talk about that next one. There's your teaser.
In the next one. I think that we did have one special case we wanted to touch on, and that was parking as a group. Whether you are in, we talked about riding as a group can be anywhere between 3 or 4 people, or as the ride I did on the weekend, I think they're talking about 60 to 65, which was mind blowing to be able to be a part of. And that's definitely a bit of a special case. I think the main thing that comes to mind for me in terms of parking as a group is really taking advantage of the size of a bike in comparison to a car or another vehicle, and parking so that you can easily get out. And so in that instance, to me, that looks like, if we're using car marked parks, trying to get as many bikes as possible safely into that car park in order to take up as little space as feasible and be considerate to other road users and park users. So that example I think we talked about earlier around having between 3 or 4 motorbikes, depending on the size, you can usually get into a park marked out specifically for a car. Mark, any thoughts for you around parking as a group?
Agree with everything you've said. Probably the only other thing I would suggest there is, and this is more targeted at newer riders riding possibly in a group where there are some more experienced riders in there. So when you are coming into a stop, if I am ever leading a ride, then I will be doing everything I can to look for a parking spot where I'm not just parking my bike. I'm actually trying to be a little bit like the Pied Piper in terms of saying, yep, I'm going to pick a spot. If you follow me in and follow my lead, and everybody else follows me in and follows my lead, then we will probably be able to stack a whole lot of bikes into the space that we've got. So very often that might be riding in parallel to the curb, slightly jutting out into the traffic, backing the wheel in, and then hopefully the person behind me sees what I'm doing, does the same, parks parallel, and everybody just continues to follow that lead. So if you're in a group, then do your best to follow what the people in front of you are doing. If you can see a pattern forming, try and follow that pattern. But also be completely not surprised when there will be one person who everybody else is lining up in a beautiful parking formation that makes it wonderful, and then somebody just decides that, they're going to come in and park at 270 degrees, parking in the absolute opposite direction to everyone else. I don't understand humans, but anyway, that's okay. Try and not be that person. If you are parking in a group, then try and follow everybody else's lead, and hopefully the leader will have started a pattern or some other way of parking that is going to do exactly what Kahiwa said, which is to try and make the most, to follow those principles, to make it easy for everyone to get out and to make the best use of the fact that you are a smaller vehicle and you can stack lots more into the same space, which is why we would love to see more people riding motorbikes, because traffic congestion and parking congestion would be a hell of a lot better in every city in the world if there were more motorbikes and less cars. But anyway, that's another high horse I will get off.
Yeah, I will say at the end of that ride, we all 60 odd of us met at a hotel for lunch, and one of the staff at that pub commented on how considerately all of the people in our ride had parked, working to have usually around kind of 4 to 5 bikes per car park, and that was in stark contrast to when they had
Some other
groups of riders, other groups riding to have lunch at their venue, and how much appreciated that was for them, but also in recognition of other kind of patrons and people using the parks and all the other shops on that particular street. So that was really nice.
Yes, it's called being considerate. Life rule, don't be a dick. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so takeaways.
My main takeaway, I think, would be those three guiding principles. So trying to make sure that you're parking in a way that's easy to get out, in a way which is making the best use of your small size and agility, and that it is and that is as safe as it can be for you and your bike. That's my takeaway. Those 3 guiding principles.
And I think in terms of the safety and stability, and the things to keep an eye out for, one, just be considerate of the legality of how you might need to park. Taking note of the slope of the surface that you're parking on and direction, the nature of the surface. So is it soft? Is it gravelly? Are there things? And making sure that you are maneuvering the bike so that it is going to be as stable as possible, acknowledging that we can't account for the poor behaviour and decisions of other road users. And also just kind of thinking about being considerate of your own safety and the bike safety. So as we mentioned, looking at places where if you need to, there might be extra security. So parking buildings or similar, and potentially the value of parking somewhere where there might be security cameras or lots of lighting if you're going to be parking somewhere into the evening or the nighttime, somewhere that you physically would still feel safe. I think that's also really important. And then the thing that I hold on to and that you reminded me of, Mark, is that it's okay to take a few goes to get your bike into that park. That is totally fine, regardless of whether you are in a motorbike park, a car marked park, or slow riding with a group or similar. Take your time to get yourself settled and get your bike into a good, stable, safe position, so that it's more likely to be there when you come back and you are ready to just hit the road and go on to the next part of your ride.
Problem solving, and problem solving doesn't always happen the first time you have a crack at it. So don't in any way feel bad if it takes you don't get it right and you think, no, I want to rejig that park, it's just not right. It's very
absolutely normal. So our next episode, we will be giving a little bit more detail about how to move your bike in all of those types of situations. But until then, please ride safe and have fun. Beyond the Pillion is brought to you by Kahiwa Sebire and Mark Drechsler, and Women Moto, the online magazine for women motorcyclists. Go to womenmoto.com. Follow us on Instagram and YouTube at Beyond the Pillion. Drop a comment or send us a DM to let us know what you want to hear more about. And if you like this episode, please leave a review or tell a friend.